Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I want to thank our leadership at Women Who Code for always bringing forward the really relevant, pertinent, and most current conversations. So I really appreciate that Women Who Code, as much as it grows and is able to host these great conferences and create these spaces, that they still maintain their ties to this community grassroots ability to be a bit more flexible, to catch and to hold on to folks and to what's going on around them, to not end up in a bubble that is separated from everything. So I want to welcome you all to this panel. I understand that we're kind of coming into it now with a certain perspective and lens. I will briefly introduce all of you, and then perhaps we can begin just by saying a couple words about yourselves. I'm just going to introduce your titles, and then maybe we can talk a bit more about culture and the lens we're bringing to this today. So with us today, we have extraordinary leadership here at Women Who Code on the board. We have Lily Chang, VP Finance, Strategic Corporate Partners at VMware. Tara Hernandez, as Senior Engineering Manager at Google Cloud. And we have Shawn Layden, the former chairman of PlayStation Worldwide Studios for Sony Interactive Entertainment. And Sandy Welfare, Director EPMO and Technology Transformation at WestRock. If maybe you want to start, Sandy, just a couple words, and then we'll go around from there.
Excited to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction. I've been in the women and girls space for a while, particularly around technology, and trying to do everything I can to change the numbers in the pipeline. So excited to be here, and more importantly, excited to talk about this subject.
Then do we want to go Shawn, Tara, Lily?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. I'm Shawn Layden. I'm the former chairman of Worldwide Studios for PlayStation. I was with PlayStation for 25 years. I was with Sony for 32 years. So I've been institutionalized, and but now I'm out in the world, and I've been on the board of Women Who Code for a few years now, and I really support the mission. I want to do everything I can to bring more voices into the room, to get more people from my bailiwick, which is video gaming, but I know Women Who Code goes much wider than that. But I'm hoping to get many more people in there building games, so we can have many more people out there enjoying games. So that's kind of where I come from. And I'll pass it over to Tara.
Hello, everyone. So as stated, I'm manager at Google Cloud. I am been a manager for most of my career. I first became a manager at 26, which some might say is a little too young, but I'm very busybody-ish that way. I'm a DevOps nerd and focus a lot on issues around organizational health and how we develop as an industry to be inclusive, not as a separate DEI discussion, but as an understanding of how we as high-tech industry are representative of the larger world. And both as customers and employees, what does the larger world look like? So I've been pleased to be affiliated with Women Who Code for many years now. I've been a board member for a couple of years, advisory board before that. And I gave my first talk at a Connect conference. So long history with the organization, and happy to be here. Over to you, Lily.
Thank you. I'm Lily Chan. Basically, I have a couple decades of software product development experience. Even though my title is VP of Finance, my finance career started about 5.5 years ago, which was a major career shift. And a lot of that shift is really the inspiration from basically working with these great members in the communities from Women Who Code. I'm from VMware, and basically being in VMware for close to 11 years, and definitely has experienced 3 generations of CEOs, and have basically been engaged very actively in the D&I world, fostering a lot of our company's culture on that, and definitely being very privileged and proud to be part of the Women Who Code leadership team and a part of the membership as well.
Thanks so much, Lily. And thanks to all of you for being here today. You know, what this particular session is about the big reshuffling. We're kind of seeing this kind of resignation and how we, or if we should be retaining people, kind of talking a bit about that. But I'm wondering if we can think a little bit about what Tara was just talking about and what she talked about a little bit in her Teal Carpet interview in the past couple of weeks around how we think about, not just culture as an add-on, not just DEI as an add-on, but how we bring this lens to everything. Maybe you can kick us off, Tara, and if folks have, some input there, we could follow on from her.
Maybe the simplest way of approaching it, how I tend to think of it, is if you're a DevOps nerd, you talk a lot about good organizational practices having a generative culture. It's something that was coined by Ron Westrom back, I don't know, in the 60s, 70s, something in there a while ago, talking about healthcare and nuclear power plants. So places where clearly you want to have good culture with your employees for good benefit. But it includes things like, don't shoot the messenger if someone brings you bad news, blameless learning culture. So don't punish people for making mistakes, look at them as learning opportunities, simple things like that. And if you combine that with DEI type of topics, and then you also thinking about how diverse and inclusive is your organization. And there are so many different ways you can define inclusion. A lot of times we think about gender or ethnicity or maybe religious background, but it also could include things like what country you live in, what is your educational background, and a variety of other things that may not be, as we traditionally think of them, as underrepresented, but impact how people will interact with each other. I have employees in my organization currently. Some are from Israel, some of them are from India, some of them from China, a lot from the United States, some from Canada. And some of the discussions, you can tell that people are bringing their experience, their ways of communication to this discussion. And it all is the same broader issue of how do we make everyone, regardless of their background, feel like they're a part of the organization and that they are able to contribute effectively. And that's why I really try to couch how we talk about this as it's not a separate thing, it's part of the whole package. And the more that we view that as leaders within our organizations, I think the more effective that we will be making those improvements that also happen to benefit underrepresented demographics in useful ways.
Yeah, and I think that's not just point Tara about people's backgrounds, even from. I also saw a lot of it, diversity in, shall we say, generations are in the room. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a boomer. There you go. I'm out there. I don't care what anyone says. But if you have a room full of boomers, you're not getting enough information in the room to make the right decisions. And that's a way we need to find ways to get people involved earlier in their career, with their young ideas, and things they can see. I think that's one of the challenges now, though I'm not in the corporate world any longer. If I had to hire people during the pandemic, I think that really sort of discriminatory against young people. Because you got to the point where you're saying, there was a time when we're in the office, if you bring people in, you hire them, you just say, follow me around. Sit in this meeting with me. Watch how we talk to these people over there. And I think remotely that became very hard. So people would think leading into just buying experience, hiring experience during the pandemic. And I think a lot of people started positions didn't get the opportunity that they were probably would have gotten in the past. So we need to be a bit more intentional about how we continue to broaden the workplace and the people that we have in it, and not just hire experience all the time, but also take a flyer and bring some young raw talent in the room and see what it does.
Had a little echo on you, Shawn, just as an FYI.
Okay.
One added fact to this, and circling it back around to this idea of the Great Resignation, or not resurrection, reshuffling. However, there's also an element of health insofar that you have a certain amount of transition. one thing that you could think of as an organization, if you've had, like, Shawn was, not to pick on Shawn a little bit, but I will, Shawn was in his position for however many years that was, how much other movement or vertically within the organization happened, right? And maybe if your echo gets fixed, you can speak to that. Because you think about at the lowest levels, the industry average is somewhere between maybe 18 months or 24 months, and for how long someone might stay, that increases the higher up in the organization you'll go. But it also means that those changes are not happening as quickly. There's a pyramid that I think has gone around where you talk about diversity and inclusion around ethnicity and gender, and it's all kind of at the lowest levels of the pyramid. And as you go up, it progressively gets wider and maler and older, right? And that's kind of a different form of diversity and inclusion challenge, which is how do you create not only horizontal diversity, but also vertical diversity within a corporate culture? And that can be really challenging because you have to make the trade-offs between someone who's been there a long time and has a lot of experience and a lot of institutional knowledge in their head versus making space for someone new to come in and bring their experience, their viewpoints, maybe a fresh look at how that particular business organization is run. So, and I've talked a lot, so I'll stop now.
I think it's go ahead, Lily.
I think we need to unmute Lily.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great now.
Okay, great. So I basically want to echo what Tara and Shawn have been stating, but I want to complement a couple of key points. One is basically a very key aspect regarding the D&I, how you blend it into the culture, is it has to be part of the company's workforce planning strategy. And basically the Great Resignation, if for a company that does not have a workforce planning, that plan for the virtual office, basically is the company that's caught a little bit by surprise, right? So it's very important that you have a strategic perspective, and that strategic perspective and also the strategic execution thrust that's associated with that workforce strategy has to blend in very deeply and broadly, like Tara was saying, from many aspects, the diversity and the inclusion aspect, right? And the other key attribute that we have learned, at least within VMware, what we have learned through the journey in the past decade, basically fostering this culture within the company, is basically is not something that your executives stand up and say, thou shalt hire in diversity and inclusion, then things will happen. There is no fairy in the wonderland, right? So you basically have to institute a lot of and make action really happen about things that really matter for that diversified group of employees. So one thing is people have to be able to feel very comfortable to bring their individuality into work. And they will be working as part of the team, no matter what the team is, and no matter what the cross-functional effort is. But they have to be able to bring their individualism into all the aspects, that including the professional work and also the community aspect, right? The second thing is we are connected tissues with the external world. All of us do not just work at our workplace. We also are living in a society. So basically, it's very important the company's strategy also pays attention to that connected tissue. This is part of the reason why our corporation pays huge attention to basically diversity and inclusion aspect. We celebrate a lot of those within and embrace on that. And so those are a very important aspect. The third aspect is reality is also very important. So one of the key things we work really hard to establish is pay equality. So we ensure 99% across all gender pay equality within the company. And we believe the 1% is a statistic noise, right? And we continue to try to do that. So those are the key things I think is actually very crucial. In terms of the Great Resignation, what we actually have seen is offering employee flexibility to work virtually, even they're located in California, in Palo Alto. And even though our headquarters is in Palo Alto, if they choose to want to work virtually, we will support them. Actually, during the pandemic, quite a bit of our employees actually relocate themselves and their family voluntarily to different states and some even to different countries. And our company supported that. I think that flexibility and the budgetary endorsement are extremely key for retention.
Thanks, Lily. I know before you were jumping on, Sandy was going to jump on. So is there anything that you wanted to add here, or did you want to take it somewhere else?
No, we can move on to the next topic. I think we've had some great points.
So just thinking about this sort of great resignation, just to contextualize it. In the US, we're looking at 4 million people quitting their jobs in July 2021, right? And that was an all-time high that broke the all-time high of April 2021 that were identical numbers. And, August and September this year, it's climbed even higher in the US. So I was reading about this before this panel about who's driving the Great Resignation. And I found two things that were really relevant to folks here at Women Who Code today. One being that resignation rates are currently the highest amongst mid-career employees, which is a little atypical, with an average increase of more than 20% between 2020 and 2021. So it's significant. And two, we're not seeing this in all industries. Manufacturing and finance saw decreases in resignations, but healthcare saw a huge jump, 3.6%, topped only by the tech industry at 4.5% for turnover here for resignations. And so I'm wondering if we can approach this, should we be approaching this with data, or do you think we should be thinking about other things here in the kind of broader context? Why particularly for mid-career employees, and why particularly in technology over anywhere else?
I think many of us probably read similar articles, and the only thing that I can say for the category of those who are 30, I think the biggest group was those who are 30 to 45. I would say these are people who have families, and they're probably then what I call the sandwich. They have young kids, and then they have elderly parents. And if you're looking at where would you spend your time and how much time would you want to dedicate to a work environment, I think people now feel I have options. And I'm assuming, though, that even though we're seeing this resignation rate increase, I think on the back end of that, you're going to see smaller businesses set up so that people have even greater flexibility around, I will work and contract myself to do certain types of work when and how I want to. And so I think that we won't know those numbers for a while. But if we were looking at this number a year from now, I would suspect that you would see small businesses set up. I think you would see a lot of women basically starting smaller companies, and maybe tech, or they may be in some other opportunity altogether. But for the most part, I think people are now looking at it as I have options. And I think that the groups that are being impacted the most are going to be the ones who are trying to juggle a family as well as elderly parents. I don't necessarily know if this will be changed in the next year. The more flexibility people have, the more they're willing to stay. But I would gather a guess that we're going to see probably different generations also being impacted. So I'm Generation X, although really I consider myself a millennial as well. But even for my generation, you're going to now see the generation before me, boomers, retiring at a significant rate, and you're needing more people in the workplace to replace them. And the biggest question you would have to ask any company is, how do you get that tacit knowledge that they have, that they're likely to take with them? So as we were talking about, if Shawn's been in his role for so long, how do you gain all that knowledge before he decides to move on? And what happens to the next generation of young people who come up, or the future leaders of the company? So for me, I think it's going to be a balance, but not much is, to me, I think time will tell what will happen in terms of, will this be a continuation, or will we see different generations being impacted?
I think it's really interesting too, because we can see evidence of cultural changes. A friend of mine pointed out she recently purchased one of those new, fancy camper vans, right? And she got lucky; she managed to get one. And she sent me a link to a company that has come out in the last year or so, where the company basically has bought little campgrounds, and you buy a membership, and you can go from campground to campground, and they guarantee broadband connection so that you could work from, these beautiful locales. It's like somebody came up with this genius idea in a world where the work circumstance has completely changed, right? And I do think, also speaking of, to kind of emphasize what Sandy's talking about, there's a lot of tech families. There are two-parent families, maybe two-parent or two adult working families. Maybe they're able to take the financial hit of one or the other taking the break. I think it'll be really interesting to see after the new year, if we start to see a climb, and a lot of the open headcount are starting to get filled in by people who took their 6-month, mental health break. Because let's face it, mentally, I think we've all taken a hit this past year and a half, given everything, no matter what the industry. But I work at Google, so I'm always about the data and what sort of data is coming out, because I think any company also needs to be, well, we can probably have some pretty decent intuition. We do need to, as much as possible, understand what is going to create that resiliency in the future, given that I think we can safely say now the world has completely changed. There is no going back to before March of 2020. There's only going forward, right? And the companies, to Lily's point, that are going to be the most successful are the ones that are able to adapt and ride that wave of understanding where are people at as human beings, so that they feel the inspiration and the motivation in order to want to do the work for your company and to help your company evolve into whatever new direction is next.
Am I still echoing?
You're good.
We solved for that anyway. I left the workforce in the before times, and got to witness the pandemic from a perspective of sabbatical, which is actually the best way if you have to have a pandemic again. Try to be on sabbatical when it happens. The thing I'm seeing is that going into the lockdown was easy because you had to work from home. It wasn't a choice. You had to work from home. As my grandfather would say, if you have no choice, you have no problem. You just have to do that thing. Coming out of the pandemic is the challenging part now.
Yeah.
And because in the before times, I used to tell my studios, this job can't be done remotely. You all have to sit in the studio together, shoulder to shoulder, every day of the week. That's how you make a game. And now patently, management can't use that excuse anymore because we've just shown that it can be done from home. Look at that. For 18 months, we've been doing it from home. And so coming back out of it, I think part of this great resignation are people who decided, wow, they want me to drive 90 minutes in the morning and 90 minutes in the evening again. Well, frankly, as a digital mercenary, I can just quit that job and look at all these other jobs that are opening up. Exactly. And where the sales point used to be, work here, we'll give you daycare and dry cleaning and massage Thursday and Taco Tuesday, and you get your hair cut. And now the top selling line is, this job can be done from home.
Yes.
You never have to come to work. And people are just looking for those opportunities now who want that. I mean, there's some people who want to go back to the office, want to go back to that collaborative era, or just want to get out of the house. I understand all those motivations, but I think a lot of people just found their run rate went down in the pandemic because you weren't traveling or going out to eat. So you really got to see how much does it cost to have a good life. And then to get back in that hamster wheel, I think, is really foreboding for a lot of folks. And because they've had a chance to see another, they've been on Earth 2 now, and they see how the world is on Earth 2. And some of them don't want to come back to Earth 1. And it's going to be a challenge for all businesses around that.
Yeah, and I would echo a lot of what Tara, Sandy, and Shawn are saying. The additional detail I will add is we learn empathy at all levels are extremely critical, because each family, just like Sandy was alluding to, right? And this is the reason why you kind of see the mid-level as the most vulnerable layer, because they are being kind of sandwiched, more than sandwiched, is a sandwich in multi-dimensional way, right? But each family has its own individual situations. So what we have basically realized is it's extremely critical to foster at all levels of management and leadership and empathy. In other words, you have to be empathetic towards the employee situation. Even though you allow the employee to work remotely, you help them to move the family to closer to their grandparents because their grandparent got into situations in the pandemic. You also have to understand that they have to juggle a lot of stuff. And so performance is important, but you have to blend in empathetic aspects. So that's a little bit of a difference in terms of human management, right? And so empathy is one key aspect. I would just add to what Shawn, Tara, and Sandy were saying.
For sure. And one thing I want to add there that I've seen, if I may, is some workplaces are not yet super open to moving to empathy because they're not quite sure what it means. And I would like to say that part of it is active listening.
Yes.
You're talking about moving folks somewhere and helping them out. It's also things like having conversations about travel and not having, I have seen in a workplace someone say, a leadership member say, well, I saw that you traveled 2 weeks ago. It's on your social. And that person's response was, it was my mother's funeral.
Yeah.
Because the leadership was saying, why won't you travel if you were traveling 2 weeks ago? So they came in with this set of, assumptions. And part of empathy is really these kind of basics in terms of organizational culture, in terms of, active listening and, making space there as a first step.
One of the things I think is worth calling out, because it's the constant struggle, and I think this applies in general when you're thinking about leadership and organizational structure, which is we want to try and trend towards the steady state, right? Because then you want to think about other things. You don't want to think about, well, how are these people, what is their schedule and who's going to be traveling to that conference? And you just kind of want that stuff to just happen so that you have these other things that you're going to worry about. And I think in the current era, this has been exacerbated, but it's always been true. And I think now we have to really own the fact that it takes a great deal of effort and intention on an ongoing basis. We never get to the steady state. And now it's, if you're not able to get to it, you're more exposed by your inability, right? There are people now, and I will frankly include myself, I'm not getting on a plane anytime soon, right? That's just not what I'm interested in doing. There are other people that I know who are like, yeah, I flew. They took pictures. I'm at the airport. This is great. First time in a year, right? And it can be as simple as just knowing who's in which camp and then adapting expectations so that you can make it work, right? And so, but you have to be willing to have someone who in your organization who owns that, the boss or the chief of staff, whatever, and know that that's going to continue to be a thing moving forward, that we don't get to step back and pretend that at some point, we don't have to worry about this anymore. And in a way, I'm kind of pleased because there's starting to be a lot more evidence that more widely seen that this is a true statement. And then we get the other benefits, right? There's also been studies coming out saying that, for example, people of color have often felt more psychological safety in their work environment when everybody's remote, because they don't get those unconscious bias body language things that they might get in the work environment. Women who are really small, who might feel intimidated, surrounded by their coworkers who are all a bunch of big rugby players, who I'm sure are very nice. But again, those unconscious kind of body language things, they don't have that anymore. They're safe. They're home, right? That's a thing, and something that we should not discount, because it is our experience as humans and it's our employees' experience. And, if that's going to make them be better employees, why wouldn't we want to support their feeling of feeling more safe and more confident in their work environment? So there's so many fun nuances to this.
Well, it's interesting. I was just talking to some friends of mine who are women, and we were talking about the pandemic and what's it like and that sort of thing. And one thing that came back and said, my dirty little secret, one of my friends said, was, I like lockdown. I like being here, doing my work, getting it done. She said she would have stress every Friday that she went to the office. Stress on Friday, what are you talking about? It's the last day of the week. Said, no, because at 4:30, people start coming around saying, everybody, let's go get margaritas. El Torito, 5 o'clock, be there. And she worried all day about coming up with an excuse on that day not to go to El Torito to have margaritas. And because not everyone wants to have that social aspect to their work. And to your point, Lily, about empathy, that's another thing. Let's understand that. Oh, come on, Joey, let's go get some drinks. God, drop that thing, let's go. That's not going to work anymore in the work environment. And we really need to understand what people want to lean into, what they want to participate with. And on the point of business travel, I think one of the things that's going to curtail that going forward is every CFO just had a year of no T&E expenses. And saw how that bottom line just, well, look at that. No travel and entertainment expenses. Fantastic. And so turning on the 12 employees go to Paris for a conference valve, I don't think that one's getting turned on anytime soon.
I was just one comment around just how the dynamics of the work environment has changed. I also think during this pandemic, it has also, to me, raised the issue around microaggression. The company cultures have to dictate what's acceptable, because the one thing that you probably see as a part of any study that you've been reading, Tara, is how have Black employees been impacted over this last year, and not in a positive way. So I think that we're probably needing to validate that there's so many different aspects of the pandemic that were really positive. There were a few that were not so positive. And I think that, to me, the microaggression around social justice during this period of time has basically forced companies into saying culturally, what do I stand for? And I think it's a great thing that it's almost pushed people beyond their comfort zone. And that part has been positive. But I would say that you're then getting a little bit of backlash from the ones who are saying, why should I care that we have Juneteenth celebration? And so we probably need to figure out what that balance is. But to me, the company culture has to dictate where do we go from here and what do we stand for?
Yeah, if you have something you want to add to that, Tara, you definitely can. We are going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I think that's a really strong point. It's something I did want to ask about, because it's not just the thing of, being at home or not. It's also been a lot of social movements, a lot of change happening and transition there. And I think where we started at the beginning of this today was around the fact that, tech is not a separate entity from everything. And, can be representative of the population, but perhaps is not in any way proportionally representative. And this tension is probably, also driving some of these. I'm not sure if you could quantify that, but I appreciate Sandy bringing this up to the top of the conversation.
I think the most interesting upshot of what Sandy was saying is that, and if you combine that with, more companies are being put, and the senior leadership being put on the spot, no sitting on the fence here, combined with more companies are increasingly supporting ease of access as far as availability of options. As an industry, our employees are increasingly going to be able to vote with their feet.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a lousy company, I won't name names, won't go that way, but if you're a lousy company, but you pay well, eventually that's not going to be enough, right? There's only going to be a certain type of person who wants to work with you. You're going to have the option to go elsewhere. And there you get that collective peer pressure that is so valuable, and it has been the most successful in driving change. And so I'm very curious to see what happens over the next 18 months.
Labor has some leverage now. It hasn't for a long time.
Bless it. Bless it all.
Really want to see this one roll out.
Yeah, I think that's it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it happens. Earlier today, I was in one of these sessions with speaker Devin Grilly, who's a professional certified coach, and has been talking a bit about where we are in the cycle of coming out of the pandemic, in terms of we all went into this hibernation at the same time. We entered a period of reflection, but everyone kind of hit that, and then the follow-on exploration period at different times. And so that's something that's been interesting to me to be thinking about, because the stat that she had was that, and this is something for everyone who's watching to think about, the stat that she had in her her talk today was that 41% of of people who are employed from whatever sample was taken are thinking about quitting their job. Now, what level of seriousness that is or isn't, I'm not sure. But 41% of people is a very big number.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm glad we're in it together. And also as leadership and management, we have many things to think about and to be shifting piece by piece. So I think we'll wrap up here. If anyone has some final thoughts, I would love to hear them about where we kind of go from here, or a next step that might be great to be taking. Any of you may begin.
One of the things I think Women Who Code always support is a career development and career transition, right? And I think the great resignation is what I've seen happen is there's a lot of that. People is not just moving company, they're moving career. They're focusing on different areas, or they are trying to learn different skills. So I think it's very important that that all the companies and organizations will bear that in mind, right? Career transition, all-time high, is really important to basically, because right now learning doesn't have to be physically going to classroom. There are many virtual classes. University have shifted, right? So that created huge opportunity for learning, and which means that a huge opportunity for people to do career transition. So I think that will be a very important aspect for all the employers and the management and leadership to be very open-minded about, is you no longer need to think like this employee is my team, so forever is mine. That mentality gotta go.
I would say, Women Who Code is a stupendous community of women who, and men, some, hi Shawn, and it's grown enormously through virtual development, and as a community, to be able to take advantage of people that and how you can network in order to take advantage of the opportunities, and learning about them, I think is going to continue to be a really key element as we move forward as an industry. Those back channel references are super powerful.
Raise your hand, reach out, ask for help. It's really okay.
Yes.
That's what we're all here to do. There's things I know because I've done them. There's things I know just because I'm 60 years old. And so if you're 24, you just can't know these things. And so please reach out, ask for help. That's the great thing about Women Who Code. We don't let anyone drown. We'll reach and pull you out of the water if we can, but you gotta let us know.
Yes.
My comments would be around the great work that Women Who Code is doing should be a continued conversation within a company. And more importantly, as they're thinking about D&I strategy, we could be a key component to how that happens to influence the improvement of women in leadership. So my company has a specified goal to reach by 2025 for women at West Rock. So each company is, I think, now being more intentional. And I think that Women Who Code and other organizations can be a part of that strategic conversation. So the next steps is always going to be ensuring that there's someone who can help bring that to bear. No different from my having a conversation with my D&I leadership to talk about the importance of us supporting Women Who Code, and we are a sponsor. So I think that we're all needing to figure out, how do I keep the conversation going? But it's going to be paramount for us to have Women Who Code at the table.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you, Lily, Tara, Shawn. It's been an absolute honor. We're going to bring our program team back on. I hope you all have a lovely evening.